Welcome back to Indiana Sports Beat with Jim Coyle, of course, coming to you from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios. Hope your day is rolling well. If not, hopefully we can get it jump-started here. We got a good friend of ours, Joe Healy from Baseball America, joining us. Joe, how you doing, brother?
Pretty good, Jim. I appreciate you having me on. Best time of the year in college baseball, so excited to talk about it.
Just very happy to have you because, man, I know this has to be a busy time for you. It is the Kentucky Derby of college baseball seasons right now. And, man, you're out and about. I was fortunate enough to meet you while you were covering Indiana not too long ago. But you get to see as many teams as probably anybody, a wide variety of college baseball during the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things I love about the job and doing this is, being able to kind of dig below the surface and go see a lot of different teams, a lot of different conferences, a lot of different players. There's good college baseball all over the place. You just got to go and find it. And I love doing that weekend after weekend.
Yeah, and baseball is a sport that is really different than a lot of other sports because it is kind of predicated on the weather. And to really accentuate that point, I call it the Sun Belt states. But those schools that are in warmer weather climates, you tend to find a lot of the better schools in that area. Where a school like Indiana, who's coming on and a program that's growing, but it's more difficult for teams like that to get up into that upper echelon.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and that's just never going to change. There's some movement to move the college baseball season back, but we're never going to get a May 1st start date, for example. That's just not going to happen. So weather's always going to be an issue for schools in the Big Ten, or even it trickles down, obviously, to leagues like the Missouri Valley Conference, and which is a good baseball league historically. But in the face of that, the Big Ten's done a really good job turning itself into basically a power conference. Obviously, it's a power conference among the very best in football and in basketball, for example. But in baseball, they're right there. I mean, they're probably never going to get 10, 11 teams into the tournament like the SEC challenges to do. Even with the ACC routinely getting 8, 9, 10 teams in, that's never probably going to be a thing in the Big Ten. But I mean, this has gone from being a two-bid league, a solid two-bid league, and the league might have got 3 teams in if things broke just right. I mean, now you look at it every year as it's kind of a bare minimum 3-bid league if things don't go particularly well. And if the league has a really good year, you get 5 teams in and you challenge to get a team to host a regional. And I think we'll probably see a day in the not-too-distant future where, they push to get 6 teams in and break their own record there. So the quality across the league has gotten better and better year over year. And that's expressed in a few different ways. I mean, the talent of the league has never been better. The competitiveness from top to bottom of the league has never been better. And the facilities on top of that, I mean, just in the last decade, just about everybody's done something really major in the facilities part of it, whether it's a new stadium or an indoor facility or something, on campus as far as training and development goes. Everybody's got something cooking from that standpoint, and that's absolutely wonderful for the league.
Yeah, you speak of facilities. I know at Bart Kaufman Field, since that was built a few years ago now, but in Indiana. Prior to that, they played at Simbauer, and it was basically a high school field. And now it's must-see TV. There are a ton of people out this weekend. As a matter of fact, it was pretty much capacity crowd for the last couple of days at Bart Kaufman. But there have been a lot of games where I was at there, and the crowds are really full. People enjoy college baseball. It's a great, inexpensive entertainment that you can get, but especially when the product is good on the field, the people will come out and watch.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things I've been most impressed with. I did not grow up in Big Ten country. I grew up in the South and, moved up here several years ago. And one of the things that really kind of impressed me right off the bat is look, when the weather gets good, people will come out to see these teams in the Big Ten. I mean, I've seen it not just at IU, but just about everywhere I've gone in the Big Ten. When the weather is warm and the product on the field is good, which now more often than not it is, people turn up. And that shouldn't be a surprise given how, these fan bases come out to support the other sports that the Big Ten has out there. So that's not really a surprise, but I think there's this misconception that there's just not the support for Big Ten baseball by and large. And again, Big Ten schools are not drawing 10,000 people like they do at LSU or Mississippi State, for example. But these are really solid crowds just about all across the league. And that's just another way in which, this league plays some pretty good baseball right up there with the best conferences in the country.
And talking about Indiana, right now they're leading the country in home runs. So that's a pretty big stat to be leading in for a school that is not part of that power play, as you'd speak. But I think they got 90 home runs on the season right now.
Yeah, and it's not just one guy either. I mean, they've got some pretty gaudy numbers in there. Matt Lloyd, chief among them, but, Cole Barr, 16 home runs, Matt Gorski, 12 home runs, Scotty Bradley's got some power, even a little bit further down with guys like Grant Richardson, Elijah Dunham, guys that maybe don't come right off the to the top of your mind right off the bat. So it's not they're not predicated on one guy just crushing a 3-run home run. They can get it from just about anybody in the lineup, and there's a little bit of a feast or famine nature to the offense. That that as well as anybody having covered them. There's a lot of talk about that, but I tend to not worry too much about that kind of thing, just because look at the results. There's been a lot more feast than there has been famine this season, and sometimes it may be the optics of it aren't great because the strikeouts are also high. That kind of comes with that, but more often than not, this offense has been really, really good this year, and it's kind of piled opposing pitching under just huge home run numbers, and I think that bodes well for the tournament setting. Particularly in the Big Ten tournament and in the regionals. Now, super regionals in Omaha, should IU get that far, those are kind of a different animal. But as far as the Big Ten tournament and regionals go, it's great to have frontline pitching. It's great to have some of that pitching depth. But the nature of those tournaments are that everyone is going to get their pitching beat up during the week. There are just too many games you have to play, and if you're going to end up on the, getting to day 3, 4. 5 of these tournaments, and or to get to the Sunday or Monday of a regional, you're going to be pretty thin on the mound if you get stretched out that far. And I use an offense that you absolutely do not want to see if you are thin on the mound, because they will really put a hurting on you. So I think it really bodes well for their opportunity to compete well, not just this coming week in Omaha, but also wherever they get sent for a regional.
Yeah, and something else I've noticed, if you look at their roster, 24 out of the 34 players on that roster are from the state of Indiana. And as a matter of fact, only 5 on the entire roster is from what I would call outside of the Midwest, either like Illinois or Wisconsin. They're all from right here. So it not only can you build a program now, it seems to be, but you can do it with homegrown products.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, a detractor might say, well, but okay, so, Indiana's having a lot of success. They won the Big Ten, but, can you win a national title, for example, with just kind of homegrown products here? And for that, I would point to a program like Louisville, which isn't that far away from IU. And that's a program that I think, because they're in the ACC, I think there's an assumption that, look, they recruit the South, they recruit the Eastern Seaboard, and that's true to a certain degree. They are able to go into those areas and get players because of the success they've had. But that's largely a Midwestern program. They're recruiting a lot of kids from Indiana, a lot of kids from Kentucky, a lot of kids from Ohio. They've got some Wisconsin kids on that roster. So they are not, a program that's kind of gone out of their geographic footprint to have success. They've got a lot of kids from that area. So, if Louisville can do it, and granted, at this point, Louisville's had the success they've had, which allows them to recruit a higher caliber of kid than most of the rest of the programs in that geographic footprint. But yeah, that's just proof that you don't necessarily have to do something, out of the ordinary recruiting wise to have success at a place like Indiana or anywhere else in the Big Ten for that matter.
Talking with Joe Healy from Baseball America, and obviously this weekend Indiana had a big weekend. They wrap up a Big Ten championship, which going into the weekend they were a game and a half back of Michigan, a strong Michigan team with a very strong pitching staff, and thanks to some help from Nebraska, Indiana sweeps Rutgers and they're able to pull out a Big Ten championship. That's a big deal for any school, but especially for a school like Indiana, who's trying to assert themselves as a dominant program in the conference at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think at this point, just with how consistent they've been, you go back to the end of Tracy Smith's tenure there before he left for Arizona State, and then Chris Lemonis, and now continue with Jeff Mercer. And at this point, Indiana, from a baseball standpoint, is the class of the Big Ten with how consistent they've been. You've had other programs that maybe, have had high highs, not to the extent that Indiana did by getting to Omaha, but they've had high highs for other programs. Think about Illinois' 2015 season where they hosted a regional and won a home regional, and before being eliminated by Vanderbilt in the Super Regional. So other programs have had their moments in the sun, but Indiana's just been really, really, really consistent. So I think this is just another, brick in that foundation of making it the preeminent program from a baseball standpoint in the Big Ten. And then winning if you want to project it forward a little bit, then winning the conference opens up the door. Indiana could maybe, if things break right and they have to get some help, but winning the regular season title was a must if Indiana wants to kind of sneak in the back door to host. One of the ways in which it's been really helpful is the Big Ten is a better conference now, is that when you go into the Big Ten tournament, most of the games you're going to be playing in the Big Ten tournament are going to be quality games. You look at the RPIs, and I have it right here in front of me: Indiana at 30, Michigan 47, Illinois 22, Nebraska 35, Minnesota 65. The only team outside of the top 100 in RPI that's going to be there in Omaha is Ohio State at 136. So just about any wins you get in the Big Ten tournament are going to be positive wins on your resume. And if they can win a regular season title, win a tournament title, which is a tough ask, I realize, but if they can pull that off and get the RPI closer to 20 than it is to 30, if some other chaos happens, Indiana's got an outside shot to host. If you're asking me to bet, I bet on that probably not happening, and Indiana ends up as a 2 seed, probably at a place like Louisville. But there is a chance for it to happen, and it opened the door this weekend for that to play out.
Which is always a good thing. And what does it say about a program when they've lost their head coach twice in the last 5 years? Good head coaches, obviously, because Tracy Smith is off to Arizona State. Chris Lemonis is down in Mississippi. I think Mississippi State, but when you lose a good head coach like that, and then now they're on their third head coach, but yet they are continuing to roll forward. Obviously, Jeff Mercer doing an unbelievable job in his first season, getting a Big Ten title back for Indiana. But that says a lot about the program itself when you're able to go through that kind of turmoil and change.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, it shows that they've done a good job hiring coaches. Because if you miss on a coaching hire, it doesn't take long for that to kind of shine through. So I think it shows that IU's done a really good job of bringing in the right head coaches to lead the program. And beyond that, I think it means that those head coaches, and this should not be a surprise with the success they had, I think it means that these coaches are recruiting the right kinds of players. You look at the Indiana roster this year, and it's, there were a lot of holdovers from, Chris Lemonis. I mean, it's obviously Mercer's first year, so there hasn't been a lot of time for there to be roster turnover, but, it's a team led by a bunch of guys who have been here. And I think that speaks to the fact that these guys are committed to the program. And they kind of have trust that, hey, this new head coach that was brought in this case, Jeff Mercer, is a guy that we can get behind, and let's play for him and let's play for each other. There was really no sign of these guys not being bought in to what Jeff Mercer and his staff was selling, and I think that's big, not only just from that standpoint, but also because it's clear that they were trying to do a little something different, particularly on offense. I mean, there's been a lot written about and talked about Jeff Mercer coming in and kind of changing the offensive approach of the IU lineup. And it would have been really easy for a lot of guys to be like, no, I don't really want to do that because I've had success doing this other thing. But it seems like the guys really bought into it, and we're kind of seeing the fruits of that labor with the way their offense has been able to roll. So it's sign of good hiring, of good culture, and bringing in the right players.
We're talking baseball with Joe Healy from Baseball America. Joe, Indiana heads off to the Big Ten tournament now to Omaha, where they'll play on Wednesday for the first time. But there's a lot of solid teams in the Big Ten tournament. You mentioned it's a tough ask for a team to win the conference and then turn around and win the conference tournament. I mean, you've got a lot of guys gunning for them. But this last weekend, Indiana was trying to win that Big Ten title, but there were other teams that were still in the hunt besides Michigan. I mean, Nebraska had an outside shot. Illinois and Minnesota were teams that were hoping for things to go their way, but there was more than one team just hoping for a title this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look down and you've got teams like Indiana and Illinois, for example, that have been really good all year. Michigan as well. And there's some teams that just have had kind of up and down. I'm thinking of a team like Minnesota. We had them ranked in the preseason, kind of based on the strength of Max Meyer and Patrick Fredrickson on that pitching staff, and Fredrickson wasn't as effective early in the year, and then he dealt with an injury, and now he's back and looking strong, and Max Meyer's been really good in that rotation. So that's a team that maybe at one point looked like they might be having a down year that seems to be playing some of its best baseball right now. Same is true with Nebraska. They've gone through some ups and downs, but, they're coming off of, winning their last series of the year, the weekend before that, winning a series against a very talented Arizona State team. Then you look at a team like Iowa. They've really, the last couple of weeks have been really tough on them. I mean, they were in our field of 64 projection just a couple of weeks ago after they won a series with UC Irvine in a non-conference series at home. Things kind of fell apart for them down the stretch a little bit. Now they're in a position where they're going to have to win the Big Ten tournament to get in. But I think that's a regional quality club that just maybe doesn't have the regional quality numbers they would need to get in. So, that's another team that's dangerous. And then you really can go, down the line with even a team like Maryland, which really hasn't had a fantastic year. They've been a little bit up and down, but they've got a guy on Friday nights, which it won't be Friday night, obviously, in the Big Ten tournament, but usually on Friday nights, and then Hunter Parsons, who's just about as good as anybody in the Big Ten, and when you have a guy like that who can start you off in the winner's bracket of the Big Ten tournament, that puts you in a position to have success. And so there really aren't any teams you can overlook in this field. And again, that's just one of the ways the Big Ten has taken a step forward than maybe 10, 15 years ago. Any one of these teams can win this tournament. There's been a lot of teams that have been a little bit more inconsistent. But if I were for some reason to go live under a rock for the next week and I woke up and you told me that any one of the 8 teams in this field won it, I wouldn't have a hard time believing you.
And I know Indiana's probably obviously one of the favorites to win, not the favorite necessarily, but one of the definite favorites. But can they? I don't think there's anything they can really do to hurt themselves in the Big Ten tournament as far as the NCAA coming the week after that.
No, yeah, I think they're pretty locked in where they are. I don't think they can really fall at all. Like I said, I laid out the scenario under which, like, maybe if you squint hard enough, you could see them hosting. But even if they go 0-2, they're going to be a solid 2 seed in a regional. They're going to be a really dangerous 2 seed. That's not the case with some of the other teams in the tournament. Michigan is one I'm watching for, just because Michigan has a really solid overall record, and they finished just a half game behind Indiana in the Big Ten standings, but otherwise their resume is a little bit thin. Their RPI sits at 47, which is right around where they'd need it to be. But some of their other metrics just really don't quite stack up. They're only 4-10 against teams in the top 50 of the RPI, and they don't have a series winning. It's a team that's projected to be in a regional this year. So I think Michigan's a team that a lot of people, myself included, have kind of just assumed for a long time now they're going to get in. They'll be fine. And then when they were winning the Big Ten, as recently as at the start of the weekend, you kind of assumed, like, okay, even if those numbers are a little bit short, winning the Big Ten will be enough of a feather in their cap to get them in. But now that they didn't win the league, it kind of puts them in a precarious position. Ultimately, I'm going to bet on them, as talented as they are, doing enough in Omaha this week to get in. But if they go 0-2 out there, there's going to be a little bit of sweating for Michigan on Selection Monday.
And then, of course, you mentioned Louisville earlier, and I'll bring this up only because they will probably be meeting in the NCAA tournament. Louisville is probably obviously a hosting spot and a potential landing spot for Indiana in the playoffs. But that's a team that they just played each other, and while it was a win for Louisville, it went 11 innings, and Indiana was right there. It could have gone either way.
Yeah, and that just shows you that Indiana, if that's where they end up, and you never know. Sometimes there are, with the way the bracket is put together, sometimes there are kind of indirect reasons why a team ends up somewhere else, because 2 teams in a regional couldn't play each other for one reason or other, so one team got bumped to a different regional. So you never know how those dominoes are going to fall. But Louisville seems like an obvious landing place for IU, and so I think that shows that Indiana can certainly play with them. The one thing, of course, you have to consider there as well, though, is that there's a very big difference between midweek baseball games and the games that get played on the weekend, or of course get played in the postseason, and that you're not seeing the top pitchers. You are seeing the best guys in the lineup, but you're not seeing the best pitching, and that's one of the biggest reasons why Louisville has done what they've done this year. Their rotation led by a couple guys in Reed Detmers, and Bobby Miller's been really good for them. Reed Detmers is kind of the headline guy out there, but he's been far from alone out there. So Nick Bennett's a solid guy they have out there. And they've got a deep bullpen, Michael Curie and Michael McAveen. They've got some pretty good pitching depth, but headlined, like I said, by Detmers, the front of the rotation. So those are guys you may not have seen as much of in a midweek game. So that's kind of the warning there, is don't read too much into that necessarily, but I think you can read into it that if Indiana does end up there, they're certainly not going to be out of their depth.
And we'll certainly look forward to that. And if you're not too busy, hopefully we can get you back on next week, as we'll be looking toward the NCAA tournament. Is the selections come on Sunday?
The selections come on Monday. So most of the conference tournaments wrap up Saturday or Sunday. And it's kind of a cool deal because the way the calendar breaks, that selection Monday is always on Memorial Day, which is kind of nice because folks are home more than they would be otherwise on a Monday. So it gives college baseball kind of has a unique opportunity to kind of be front and center on that Monday with everybody talking about the bracket. So yeah, Monday bracket show. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's one of my favorite days of the year. Obviously, there are no games on that Monday, but it's not too different than the basketball selection Sunday, where it does give you kind of a little bit of time to look at the bracket and talk about favorites and upsets and things like that. So it's always a lot of fun.
Well, we'll certainly see if we can get that worked out. Love to have you back on, Joe. Joe Healy from Baseball America. I can't thank you enough, man. Appreciate your expertise and your time.
Absolutely, Jim. Happy to do it.
Thank you so much. Joe Healy from Baseball America. We'll be back with more on Indiana Sports Beat right here from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios right after this.